Okay, go.
Hey everybody, welcome to Faces of Next Gen Live. My name is Eric Wells. I'm the education coordinator for the Next Gen Genealogy Society, and I'm also my company's, what's my company? Legacy Left Right, yes. Oh, so smooth in the beginning. So welcome to Faces of Next Gen Live. This is where we talk to genealogists and both young and old and try and connect them together and just get to know them. Today, I am so excited. I am very, very lucky to talk to Mr. Extreme, the co-host of Extreme Genes, Mr. David Lambert. How are you doing, sir?
I'm doing great out here south of Beantown where I live. Everyone says, oh, how's Beantown? You must love living in Boston. I said, no, I live 20 miles south of Boston. So working there is fine, but I like the country.
Now, do you know if it's true that Boston baked beans actually came from Boston?
The old rhyme that, you learn when you're a kid, Boston, the bean and the cod, where the Cabots speak only the Lowells and the Lowells speak only the Godders, if the Lowells speak only the Cabots. I guess it depends if you're a Cabot or a Lowell. I'm a Lowell, but and not from the money, trust me. It's one of those things where you get these urban legends going, and it's probably some truth to the old Boston baked bean. It's kind of like anything else. Things get lost to history.
Right. Now you have actually a kind of an important announcement. Not only are you the co-host of Extreme Genes, that pretty awesome podcast, but you're also the head genealogist at the New England Genealogy Society, right?
The New England Historic Genealogical Society. Yeah, I'm their chief genealogist. Yeah.
Got it. How long have you been doing that?
I've worked with them, and next month will be 24 years. Half my life now I've spent with them. And I started off initially in what was their book loan department. So some of your listeners who ever actually rented books from NEHGS, I used to pull the orders and pull them. And then all of a sudden one day, the director of the library, Ralph Crandley, came up and goes, "Hey, listen, you own a home computer, don't you?" And I'm like, "Yeah." He goes, "Do you want to be on our computer department?" There was only one other person. I helped develop the first web page for the society. I'm not Al Gore. I can remember when we had one email address, 7476312@CompuServe.com, because I used to
CompuServe.
Yeah. Back in the days when genealogy was done on FidoNet. Now, of course, many of you probably know Dick Eastman. Dick Eastman and I used to talk on bulletin board systems back in the late 80s, early 90s. But yeah, so I worked there. I was their computer person, and then I became in charge of their microtext department and online genealogist for online stuff. And then a few years back, they decided to make me the chief genealogist, so I'm very honored, and gets me a chance to meet some of our hundreds of thousands of constituents around the country and the world. In fact, in a couple of weeks, I leave for Scotland to lecture.
Oh, nice. That's going to be fun. I've never been to Scotland. Have you been there before?
I have. I've been. I went in high school, and then I went with the society just about 7 years ago. We had a tour out there, which is great. It's about 25 people on the tour. We'll be in Scotland's people, the archives, and doing a little touring around the city. So it should be fun. And I'm bringing my daughter, which is even the best part.
Oh, that's pretty darn cool. I bet she'll enjoy it.
She's been wanting to go on trips with Dad since, she was tiny. She used to, say, "Daddy, when are you taking me on a trip?" Well, now that she's 21, almost 22, I don't have to worry about her roaming the streets and getting, taken away. I probably feel the permission to try with her. No, she's training to be a teacher. She's in her third year of college. I'm very proud of her. She wants to be a special needs teacher. And so her ancestor is actually from Scotland. Her great-grandfather came over in 1923 with his parents when he was 3 years old. And this is the first time any member of her family has ever returned to Scotland.
That's
over
cool.
90 years. So it means cool. A lot.
So not only do you do those two things, but you also have a brand new birthday on the internet to celebrate.
Yeah, I decided, I've had a few dozen people over the past few conferences say, "Well, what's your blog?" Well, I don't have a blog. I blog through the society once in a while. And I decided that, I got the blessing of NEHGS to go out and blog. My biggest problem, Eric, was trying to decide what to call it. You get all these ideas. Oh, I want to blog. Oh, I might still have a title. So I brainstormed today, and today is my blogger birthday, I guess. I created a title called The Past Finder. And the reason I did that is because of a title that was given to me, not by a genealogist, but a group of people. And back in the early 90s, I went to a powwow for sort of local Indians. It was really not one group. And I saw a person go by. His name was Clinton Wicks, and I learned later. And someone said, "Oh, there goes the chief of the Ponkapoag Indians." Well, I've been researching them since I was like 10 years old because they were the praying Indian village in my town. I remember going to the Historical Society when I was 10 or 11 and asking about, the Ponkapoag Indians. And they had like a little folder full of information. And everything I looked at said they're extinct. Well, the interesting thing is I look up an obituary, Eric, and it say, "The following is the last of the Ponkapoag. He is survived by the following people." How do you be the last if you have descendants? So a few hundred people later, I was able to gather up this information. So when I saw this guy, Clint Wixon, whose Indian name was Lightning Foot, besides being a fast runner, I said, "What is your name?" And he mentioned his name. And I said, "Oh, you're Clarence Manto Wixon's son. Your dad was killed by an accident back in 1942. And let's see, and that means you're Lydia Tinkham's grandson." And then I went back and I gave him his oral history back to the 1750s, just off the top of my head. The guy's eyes popped out of his head and he goes, "We need to talk." And that was back, gosh, well over 20 years ago now. And fast forward a little bit. So I was helping them out. I mean, putting their genealogy together, helping them research, giving them members of the tribe they didn't even know existed because I had found them.
Right.
Brought them back to my hometown. They had what is called a Susquehanna Kiwash, which is a planting of the New Year celebration, back in Stoughton for the first time in well over 200 years. And back in 97, my mother was diagnosed with cancer, and she died. Actually, she got diagnosed earlier than that. It was in 98 she died. My father died in 99 from related cancer. And I had gone to all of their meetings at the church, and usually they would have like a member meeting, and then I would go and talk at a business meeting. Well, they asked me to go earlier, and they asked me to go into the circle, which is in the Indian group. That's the inner circle. So something was going on, and I thought to myself, well, what did I do wrong? Did I, do something wrong to a member of the tribe? But did I say something wrong? And they said, "David, you've lost enough family members. It's time for us to welcome you into ours. You've always done everything you can to bring us our ancestors. To us, your name is Minenwulf Natak." In Algonquin, it translates to past finder. I'm the one that brought their ancestors back. And Eric, I'll tell you, outside of fatherhood and being married and having a title brother and all that sort of thing, that rates right up there. I can't, any accolade I ever get won't ever equal. So
no, that story kind of gave me a little bit of shivers and chills. That's really cool, really, and such a high honor to have received.
Well, I mean, it really is. I mean, and to be perfectly honest, I mean, I have ancestors that have been on the shores of Massachusetts in 1629, and the atrocities that my ancestors committed against, not their ancestors directly, but as a whole indirectly, from the Pequot War, King Philip's War. I don't know. I think the calm is an important thing, and I feel like I'm just paying back. So all the years of genealogy I've done and what I continue to do, I've never charged them for, never would. In fact, for the most part, anybody who's ever approached me who's Native American, if I could do anything within my cable toe, the sonic term, I would be more than happy to help them and advise them. And obviously, I can't stop and do 30 hours worth of free research, but you understand where I'm getting at. It's like I feel like I have to give something back. So
yeah. And so your new blog is called thepastfinder.wordpress.com. That's where you can find it, right?
That's correct.
Okay, cool.
And it's brand new, so I'm going to try to blog at least once or twice a week, and throw something entertaining or interesting out there, and so spread the word. I'm new. I do. What's interesting is I heard Genia bloggers with Thomas McKenty, new bloggers. So my timing is just horrible.
He just,
I read
that recently.
Yeah, I saw a post in regard to that he's no longer going to list new bloggers on Genia Blogger. I'm like, oh, well, who knows? Maybe someone else will pick it up. So there might be a listener out there with a great idea to pick up where Tom left off.
What's kind of neat is that since we've been doing this, I've been looking at the statistics in the back office for these, and we've had quite a few people, quite a few viewers, and so it's really been I've been encouraged to continue doing this for the next gen folks because our viewership and interest seems to be picking up. So yeah, this is I think this will get your blog out to several people. I know I'm going to be following it.
Thank you very much. I appreciate it. Like I say, and if I make anything stupid out there, please call me on it, because I hate to follow suit with something. Sometimes I can just ramble on. Unfortunately, that's probably why they put me on a limited amount of time on Extreme Genes.
So, all right. So you happen to mention that you've been doing this genealogy. You've been working for the New England Historical Society for half your life now. So how
Yes.
old are you?
Oh gosh, here we go. I was born June 28th.
I tell you what, you can give me an age range if you don't feel comfortable.
No, I don't mind. I will be 48 in just a couple of weeks. I was born the 28th of June, 1969. My parents firmly put my diapered bottom in front of a television set 3 weeks after before man landed. Well, let me rephrase that.
Cool.
They put me in front of a television set 3 weeks after I was born to watch man land on the moon. Of course, I remember none of it. If I did, I'd have a great memory, and I could, write a wonderful book about it. But yeah, I was born the summer of Woodstock, though my parents weren't hippies. In fact, my parents were late in life. My mom and dad were 39 and 43 when they had me. My dad was a World War II veteran.
Oh, wow.
And yeah, he was in the Army Engineer Construction Corps. He had his foot crushed by an ice truck back in the 20s, so he couldn't get into any branch of the service. And so he finally got in the Army Engineer Construction Corps and built air bases over in Europe. So, yeah, that means a lot to me. And most of the kids when I was growing up said, "Oh, my dad was in Vietnam." I said, "Yeah, my dad was too old, and my dad was in World War II." And because of the generation gaps in my family, my grandmother's uncle was a drummer boy in the Civil War. And of course, that would cause all sorts of like, "Oh, you're a liar, Lambert." And I'm like, "No, it's truth." I've loved genealogy. I started when I was 7, and basically I was home from school, and a tintype photograph of my great grandfather fell out of a book. And I asked my grandmother, who was 80, the idea that a 80-year-old lady could be young enough to have parents, let alone be a child.
Right.
And she said, "Oh, this is my dad." So, of course, you're innocent at 7, hopefully, and then you haven't experienced a lot of deaths in your family. So my first reaction is, well, can I meet him? Where does he live?
Yeah.
Died in 1921, so that was impossible. And she opened up this genealogy, Eric, and there was her mother and father and her 2 oldest siblings. And I said, "Nanny, you're not in here." She goes, "Well, I wasn't born yet."
Oh.
So, well, let's write a new book. And I hummed and hawed with it. And then she said the one thing that really hooked me, no pun intended, her father was on a whaling ship. And for me, that was the best thing ever, because we had learned a child's version of Moby Dick in school just weeks before. So the whole thing was like, I have a connection. And for me, and this is what I always tell parents, teach kids genealogy. They get a better sense of where they come from, because they can see where they fit in world or American history or Canadian history, whatever the case might be. And it's a wonderful way of embracing that. You see where you fit. So for me, I love social studies and history, and obviously my degree was in history. So thanks, Nana, wherever you are.
Good thing you didn't go, "Thanks, Nana."
No. Actually, this was her room. I've lived in, let's see, 1, 2, 3, 4 generations have lived in this same house. This used to be my grandmother's bedroom. Now it's a spare room. So.
Did you say your grandpa built it?
No, they purchased it. Ironically, they purchased it they moved in June the 26th, 1965, and my grandfather, who I didn't know, was so agitated because the movers were late. Eric, he dropped dead that day.
No.
As they were moving into the house. Yeah, he died at the other residence. So I never knew my grandfather, and my mother was at that point single, and so she met my dad a couple of years later, and then I was born a couple of years after that. So I don't know, maybe if my grandfather didn't die, we wouldn't be having this right now. So
that's a good point.
Funny things that happen in genealogy.
Yeah, it's and I hear that quite a lot. Are the things that get kids hooked or people hooked in genealogy are like what you said, the connection, but also like the stories that go along with the connection to kind of make it real. What is a great skill to have as a genealogist is the storytelling skill.
And that's one of the things I always try. We just had to come home to New England at NEHGS in Boston. We usually have a similar program twice a year. And as we go around the room, I tell people, I said, it's not so much what fits in your chart or what fits on the computer program you're in, it's the stories.
Yeah.
I mean, a common thing I tell people, how did your parents meet? Where did they go to school?
Yeah.
Where were their jobs? If your parents are still alive, ask them. I asked mine years ago, and I'm grateful I did, because by the time I was 30, they were both gone.
Yeah.
And then take that same question. How about your grandparents? Well, some people have their grandparents alive. Ask them, because this is the thing you're not going to find on a marriage record.
Right.
Or, education, schools, where do they live? Take them on a road trip. Go see these houses, these farms and things like that. It's so important, because if you're going to convince a non-genealogist to become a genealogist, they're not getting hooked by the names and dates. They're getting hooked by the stories. And that's the truth.
And when those people are gone, you can only rely on the memories of the folks who are alive, or digging through doing a ton of work to dig through newspapers, or dig through court records, or dig through periodicals or something like that to reconstruct and bring these people back to life. And for
every
me,
time an old person dies, we lose an archives. It's the truth.
Yeah. And for me, I love that digging process and sort of bringing out whatever's there and bringing people back to life. I love it.
One of the aspects of genealogy when I'm building a sketch, in fact, for my hometown, we'll have our 300th anniversary in just about 9 years. And I wanted to adopt all the early colonial families that came into the town starting in 1726. It's building a timeline of every time they show up in a record, like bullet points.
Cool.
And that way you can kind of see, all right, David's checked off all these things. I don't need to look at it. Here's the citation where it comes from. So
yeah.
Getting all the details.
You've done a ton of research on your own family. Do you have someone that you would really love to meet?
Who would I love to meet? I would probably say my great-grandfather was on a whaling ship. I was very lucky to, here he is. He died in 1921, and I probably know more about him than his daughter did. And because I followed suit on the whaling story for so many years, I went to the newspapers on the New Bedford Standard Times, and the whaling papers would follow where the ships were. So if a ship went out, another ship said, oh, this one's off this coast. Well, he was on it for 2.5 years. About 10 years ago, the logbook for the vessel showed up and was given to the New Bedford Public Library. So I know everywhere he was from 1871 to 3, longitude and latitude. So I've been able to map where the vessel was. But here's the thing. The ship hit another ship, ran aground. Everyone got off the ship fine, except for the captain's wife got injured. And then within 8 months, he made it back from Valparaiso, Chile on another boat back to New Bedford to marry my great-grandmother. My grandmother's parents had lived across the street from each other during the Civil War, and I found the street address. I don't think she ever knew that story because she never told me it.
Oh, wow.
So it's funny, the things you find out, and sometimes we find out things that our parents or grandparents may have not wanted us to find out, and I've got a few of those skeletons too.
And that's what I love too. Like when I started researching my own family, the credo that I kind of took on was this warts and all, trying to find just the good, the bad, the ugly, and it was a lot of fun because as a person, you're not always good. At least I know that I'm not, and that's a part of who we are as people. Is not only the good things that you do, but the mistakes that you made, and even the black sheep who do some of the bad things, and those stories are just so great, and they begin to just add another dimension to the people as you bring them back to life.
That's why I tell people to keep journals, but do as I say, not as I do, because I am probably the worst journal keeper. I used to stop and start them. It's like an old car. Occasionally it will start up and I'm running with it really good, and all of a sudden it's like, oh, what's that, a butterfly? And I chase after the butterfly, and I forget I have this journal I started. And then I say, oh, maybe it's blank. Oh, no, I worked on it for 3 months. So people will think that I had lapses of my memory starting from when I was 12, which is when I started my first one.
So what was one of your surprising discoveries that you made when you were doing research?
Actually, my most exciting discovery was for DNA. My Lambert family I really didn't know a lot about it. My dad would always say his father was born in Nova Scotia. Well, the truth be told, my grandfather wasn't born in Nova Scotia. My grandfather was a bit of a hooligan. He was a bootlegger back in the 20s and 30s in East Boston. In fact, as story went, he was a bootlegger for Joseph Patrick Kennedy. So, needless to say, there's probably a lot more stories there. I've heard a couple of stories from my dad, and they're quite humorous. But to know who my Lamberts were, I couldn't go past my grandfather. I knew his parents after a while, but it was the death of my dad's sister when she was 11. My grandfather was the informant, and he put down where he was born. He never wrote any other place but Halifax, Nova Scotia. He wrote Saint-Pierre-et-Miquelon. Well, Saint-Pierre-et-Miquelon is a French island off the coast of Nova Scotia, Newfoundland. So, Eric, I'm Lambert now, not Lambert. So I thought. So I did all this research, and I've been to Saint-Pierre, and that was really where it got exciting. My great-grandfather was a merchant from Nova Scotia.
Oh, okay.
Who settled in Saint-Pierre during the time of the transatlantic cable. He married a woman in Newfoundland. So my grandfather is French for one generation because he is born on Saint-Pierre, which is still legally France. But here's the kick. So I go to Saint-Pierre, and I go to the archivist, and he lays all these documents. He goes, "David, I have a surprise for you." And I said, "What?" "Well, I'll show you where your ancestors lived, where the governor of Saint-Pierre asked them to leave immediately." It turns out, and this is the truth, it's in the newspaper, in 1902, my grandfather was accused of being a spy for the Canadian government for over 30 years, reporting where the French were fishing in Canadian waters to the Canadian authorities. He was a plant. He was given 24 hours to leave the island with all of his belongings, get on a boat, and the next week paper said, "Mr. Lambert was seen rowing out to the such and such boat out into the harbor to leave for Newfoundland." So there's more to that story. And again, because I'm a bad journal keeper, he probably was too. For my Lamberts, so we're French for a generation. My great-grandfather's grandfather was an immigrant to Nova Scotia from Ireland in about 1792. And there are 7 living male Lamberts in Canada, and very few of us here in America. We kind of dotted out. In fact, my line from my dad is all, I have 2 daughters. My late brother has a daughter, and she had a daughter. So chances are the domino effect, I'm going to be kind of like the last of the Lambert sons on my branch. So fun stuff. Yeah. Fun stuff. Yeah. DNA's helped out a lot. I found some close cousins in Ireland, but not 111 out of 111. It's been 2 at 100 out of 111. So it's almost there. I know you're out there. Come and find me.
Now, do you have some favorite books that you like reading, genealogy related or otherwise?
It's funny. I have thousands of books. And as my wife and my family members say, "Dad, you have all these books, but you don't read a lot of them." Well, they're reference books, and they're guides to looking things up. One of the books that I use all the time for my research is I tell people, I said, if you can't find them in the town and vital records, look at the church records. So a late colleague of mine, Harold Worthley, in 1970 wrote his college dissertation on where all the congregational church records and Unitarian records were in Massachusetts. I think it's just all the time because I'm like, oh, well, the record's burned or the church merged. And it's things like that. So for me as a genealogist, we have over 250,000 books at NEHS, and we have 28 million manuscripts. So that really is my library. What else I have fits in the confines of my old Victorian home. But trust me, I'd have a lot more if I could. Thank goodness for ebooks and PDFs.
Oh geez, yeah, those ebooks, man. I got a new Kindle and just can cram so many books onto that Kindle. It's amazing. I probably want to get through them all, but I love it.
Well, just on a thumb drive itself, I mean, how many PDFs I have of things that I just don't need to worry about, oh, where did I put that? My problem is to sit and label all my thumb drives so I know a number on it. So it's like a library book saying, what's on this one? Instead of putting it in, nope, that's not it. Nope, that's not it. And I do that all the time. I probably have well over 100 thumb drives that I've picked up over the years. So
yeah, in some cases, the new digital age has made us be able to have and store a ton of digital stuff on a tiny space, but it doesn't necessarily encourage organization things can easily get lost.
Well, it's really scary, Eric, about the digital age. I mean, I like to think that, we're very lucky that we lived in the 20th century before the internet and before electronic photos and before having everything on a smartphone and whatnot. What are we leaving the 22nd century? I mean, I had this discussion with historians and archivists before. We don't print out emails. We have video conversations, and no offense to this, but we don't write letters anymore. We don't do postcards. So we're not leaving a physical imprint. And people are already seeing the VHS tapes that we did back in the 80s. If you don't copy them over to another media, you're going to lose them.
Yeah.
So people don't print off their emails. Everything is done through social media. I mean, I like to think that one of the best things that Facebook did was that you can go on and print off like your year on Facebook if you wanted to. I don't think I need to know how many times people invited me to Farmville, but
yeah, I was
where I'm getting.
I was so much a little while ago too, and I think I might have mentioned it on one of these interviews. But 50 years from now or something, if I had kids, my grandkid would say something like, "Oh my gosh, I got access to my grandpa's Facebook account, and you should see some of this stuff."
Oh yeah, exactly. No, the thing about Facebook I find is hilarious is that those old pictures from your teenage years that surface because your friends are now on Facebook that you haven't seen in 30 years. It's like, oh, thank you for dredging up that brain cell for me. So
now, what kind of areas of research do you have like a specific interest in, or that you love doing? What kind of areas are like that?
Well, like I say, the thing for me is really the stories. So one of the elements, and I always found when I got into genealogy that if I was going to make a name for myself in the industry, I figured I'd need a niche. So I picked military. I used to be a Civil War reenactor, so I decided when I started at NEHS, which I was a reenactor then, I would go out and look for military background on people because it adds that dimension to the story. So with military research, I try to go beyond that. All right, let's plug our ancestor into a .com, find the information, and that's it. I want people to adopt the regiment. I don't care if it's the colonial wars or right down to people that are in Vietnam and recent wars. If you understand who the other people are, you often find more context to their story and where they actually have been. So for me, it's military research and adopting the regiment and knowing everything you can on the soldiers. I mean, Rev War in particular, you can look up a pension file on your ancestors. So all of a sudden, without in the Civil War, you find affidavits from other soldiers. Well, do you think you might want to look their pension up to see if your ancestor wrote an affidavit? It gives another description. So
yeah, that's a very good point. A very good point. Are there other areas of research that you want to learn more about, but don't necessarily have a lot of interest in or experience in?
Well, for me, I'm always finding genealogy is an interesting school. It's a school because when people come to NEHS, they may start talking about, their ancestors from Sicily or their ancestors from Finland. Well, I'm going to work with them to find their ancestors. So in the basis of doing that, I'm learning about a new type of research. Every year I go out to Salt Lake City, Utah. I've been going out there for over 20 years with the society. And the international floor, it's a little foreboding because of the language barrier. So like for me, I've tried my best to learn a little about French. My wife has French Canadian ancestry, so to try to understand at least how to read the records on, not necessarily be fluent in French. I have a little bit of German ancestry. It would be nice to be able to read the old German script. So it's a never-ending process, but I'm always up for a challenge. I love reading old handwriting. That's one of the things, the old secretarial hand of the 17th century. I was able to read that by the time I was 14 in most cases. And I think that was part of my job security at work for a while.
Because you could read what most people couldn't read.
And it's scary. The handwriting that we learned in grade school, a lot of schools aren't teaching it anymore, Eric. And it's heartbreaking because it's going to be like the secret code for us when we're great grandparents. We'll write a handwritten note and no one else will be able to read it on social media.
That's so crazy to think, like, if you just wrote a note in cursive, could a kid read it?
Well, I mean, look at deed research. I mean, when you look at deeds, in most cases, it's a very standard grade penmanship that they wrote in the deed books. I've had no less than 3 college students come to NEHS to read deeds, and listen, can you help me? I can't read this. I said, oh, is it in French or what is it?
College
They're like,
student?
oh no, it's college students. And they really have no concept of handwriting, or they cannot follow the way it is. I mean, you know, when I look at it, and it's like, boom. So my point is to any of the parents out there, if your kids aren't learning handwriting, give them one step up, teach them. Because that way, when they read your genealogy notes, they'll know what it is.
Yeah.
The old documents.
I'm wondering if in the future, I mean, I'm sure that it will exist in the future, but like the ability to program how to read a cursive or a handwritten note or something way back then, like where it would just automatically transcribe it for you, like you could with a printed text or something. That would be interesting.
There is actually a company I saw at Roots Tech, Eric, that actually is, I think they're from France, and they are developing the technology in OCR to actually read some cursive. Now, mind you, some handwriting is going to be impossible. I mean, doctor's notes and things like that, or, you know, even some people's own version of shorthand. You know, and I like to think that my handwriting's okay, but really, to be perfectly honest, I print everything when I write.
Yeah.
I sign my name. And it's because I really did not like my third grade teacher very much. And that's when we were learning the cursive. And if I had to cursive write my name, it would look no different than it did in 1978. You know?
Yeah. I have my own library, my old library card from the town I grew up in, like, and I got it when I think I was 7 or 8, and I tried to sign my name in cursive, and I look back at it now, I'm like, this is awful. But like what you said, I print and write. When I write, I print. I feel like it's faster for me. But if I sign my name, it looks pretty darn close to what the child wrote back, 30 years ago or something like that.
Well, my hat's off to my parents and grandparents that, would sit there and they'd slap rulers across the wrist if they didn't, write correctly. Oh, my dad, who had to learn how to write with both hands because he was left-handed. So.
Yeah, I think that my dad, I think, was born left-handed, and they forced him to write right-handed, and his handwriting is awful. But luckily, I'm left-handed, and they were okay with by the time I got into school about it.
Yeah. Well, thank goodness for teachers being a little bit more lenient.
Now, do you take you're a professional genealogist? You take on clients and stuff like that, right?
Actually, I haven't in years because it's a non-competition agreement that I have with the society.
Okay.
So because they have a research services at NEHCS, I've had countless people ask me to do research. What I basically do, it's sort of like, I'll look something up for you if you can then in return look something up for me. So like I have a friend in Salt Lake City, I have a friend in Washington, D.C., over in England, Ireland. So it's sort of like, quid pro quo, you help me, I'll help you.
Yeah.
So that's about it. No, I haven't taken on clients in a long time. One of the last clients I had was the Eastern Pequot Indians, which I did, 325 hours of research to find out that, in fact, they were, in fact, related to this other tribe. And I don't think anything happened of it, but needless to say, I had a very good Christmas that year.
That's just a great thing to have done for the Indians. That's the Pequot Indians, and those are local in Massachusetts. Am I right?
Actually, in Connecticut.
Connecticut.
Yeah, in fact, it was funny because it started off with like, oh, no, I'll help you. And they're like, no, we have to pay you. And I said, well, how many hours are you talking? And they showed me it. And I said, yeah, that's going to take a while.
Yeah.
So I was able to do some of the work out in Salt Lake City and long before things were online. But yeah, I wish them well. I don't know whatever. I think it was part of towards a court case or to try to prove this person was related to that person. But I gave them all the evidence. So, and that was well over 20 years ago now.
And when you first started out in genealogy, even though you were 7, or maybe when you got into it more and more, what do you wish what you had known about it then that you don't that you know about it now? What do you wish you had known back then?
I actually wish I had the technology of DNA. Autosomal tested my mother and father, my grandparents, and anybody living that was over 70 years old.
Yeah.
I think of all the people that have passed that I would have. This will just it's mind blowing. I interviewed my parents when I was 12 on cassette tape, but I never sat down. I had a video camera. We'd videotape Christmases and stuff like that. But I always figured they'd be around.
Mm.
And the next thing I know, they got sick and then they died. So I guess my advice to anybody is don't wait. Take advantage of the resources you have, your family, and interview them. And I don't care if it's yourself. Like I say, my parents are gone, my grandparents are gone, all but one half uncle, they're all that generation is dead. And here I am, 47 years old. Interviewed myself. Have I done it? Have I sat in front of a camera and started spilling out all this useless genealogical garbage so others can learn from it down the road? Not yet, but maybe on some rainy afternoon.
Well, on a little positive note, you're kind of doing a little bit about that right now.
That's true. I am preserving my own past.
There you go. Yeah, I really like how you said the DNA when you had first started out, because just in February I lost a great aunt, and I did get her DNA done. I got her Y done as well, and I had done it like a year before. So these people, not only do we care and love about them, but they're precious resources that are not renewable at all. And that's a very good point. I think back then we could only do blood tests to confirm paternity, but nowhere near DNA.
Yeah, you can really find out who the daddy is now. A good friend of mine, Bill Griffith, who's the co-host of CNBC, wrote the book Stranger in My Genes, because he did an autosomal test, and his cousin came up and said, wait a second, you're not related on this level. And all of a sudden he found out that, well, I'll let you read Bill Griffith's book, but needless to say, his daddy wasn't his daddy. And he confronted his 90-year-plus mother with it. So it's definitely an edge of your seat type book. For me, the DNA part of it is like, a lot of people will test their own Y DNA or get their brother if they're a gal, or their dad. And of course we all can test our mitochondrial, but I'm now working to try to get the DNA of my great-grandparents' haplogroups. So right now, my maternal grandfather's mother died in 1920 when she was 42 from tuberculosis, influenza actually, up in Toronto. And she's long since dead. My grandfather had the mitochondrial but didn't pass it on to his kids. But his sister has a living daughter.
Yeah.
And one of her nieces in Calgary has convinced her, well, actually her niece is in Utah, convinced her to have a mitochondrial. So now I'll have the mitochondrial DNA of this late great-grandmother. And I've got another one, who, ironically, another Canadian, who lives in New Brunswick, and she has my dad's father's mother's maternal mitochondrial DNA. So it just adds different angles. It gives us more of our picture.
It really does. Yeah. With how powerful and just awesome those Y and mitochondrial DNAs are for connecting way deep and confirming some ancient connections. I'm really glad that we have come to such a place in technology where we can do that kind of thing, because it's going to help. I'm doing something similar, but I'm trying to solve a bust through a brick wall for this one woman who was born in the 1870s, and we're trying to see if we can get her to a family that we suspect she came from. And the xDNA is the only, or the mitochondrial DNA is the only way you can really do it right now with how far back that is.
Well, it's funny. I'm very lucky that my umbilical line, on my mitochondrial line, there's a woman named Sarah Brown, maiden name unknown. So Sarah Blank Brown dies in 1672. I have her mitochondrial DNA, and I've gotten through family tree DNA at least 2 exact full mitochondrial DNA matches that are in southern England. The genealogy always put this family in like Wales or like middle England, and that's not the case at all. Now, not that I'm going to look for every John Brown and Sarah marriage in Southampton area or England, but at least I know somewhere on the line we match. And the thing that blows my mind away with the Y DNA is that, really, what is our ethnicity, Eric? I mean, so I tell somebody I'm American. I'm a dual citizen with Canada. My Lamberts, well, one branch of it, they're from Canada. Then before that, they're from Ireland. But genetically, if I go all the way back, my I2A asterisk Western haplogroup starts in Bosnia.
Mm-hmm.
Then they go to Germany because I have a SNP there. Then England, and then Ireland. So I am a Bosnian Goth, Norman Invader to Ireland, Canadian American who became dual citizen with Canada again. But that's only one branch. So when people tell me their ethnicity, I always say, how far back?
Yeah. Yeah. Now you attend a lot of conventions. You had talked about it. Which one are you going to be at next?
I'll be speaking at FGS in Pittsburgh, and I will be giving a lunch and talk and two genealogy lectures. One is on Revolutionary War and Colonial War research. The other one's on researching in New England records. So I'm looking forward to that. And
when is that again?
FGS is in Pittsburgh, Pennsylvania at the end of August, beginning of September of this year. I was just at NGS out in Raleigh, North Carolina, and actually I'm leaving this weekend to lecture out in Bellevue, Washington for about 100 NEHGS members at a program giving about 3 talks. So jet setting all over the place again.
And we mentioned your blog earlier in this interview, thepastfinder.wordpress.com. But where else can people find you on the interwebs? You're pretty active on Twitter.
ExtremeGenes.com. You can catch the weekly radio show and podcast. We go out to 53 cities and towns across as a radio show, which makes it a little bit more unique than most because there are no other radio shows on genealogy. So we have that syndication. We're on iHeartRadio.
Those radio stations are all listed on your website too.
They are, yeah. But if you can't get the radio station in, you can listen to the podcast, which is made every Monday. We've been really lucky. Our downloads are up to about 50 to 57,000 a month, which is great.
Yeah.
I was asked to be on the show after being a guest, as one person said, "Well, Dave, you have a face for radio." I said, thanks. So, yeah, so I've been on it now for going on 2 years, and Scott Fisher, who's the founder of it, is a great guy, and I love being a co-host on Extreme Gene. So tune in. Definitely be talking this week that I was on Next Gen, and I think he plugged it. I know NEHGS plugged, gave some love to the link, so hopefully that draws some people in. And hello to everyone from Extreme Genes and NEHGS.
And how can people find you on Twitter?
On Twitter, my Twitter hashtag is DL Genealogist, and just broke the 5,000K Twitter followers. So I guess they like when I'm retweeting or tweeting.
Yeah.
So it's a lot of fun, and that was one of the reasons.
Twitter is for 24 years now. 24 years you've been on Twitter now, and you finally got to 5,000.
24 years. Yeah, I didn't find Twitter. I originally didn't find much of it. I shouldn't say use. For me, I'm very long-winded, as you can hear, but also when I type, I write long. And of course, that limitation on Twitter is aggravating.
Yeah.
So that's why I decided I have to blog.
So now you can just tweet out your URLs for the post. The
exactly.
Post link. Well, that's gonna wrap it up for today, man.
Cool. Well, I really enjoyed it, and I hope that we touched on everything you wanted to ask, man.
Yeah.
I'll be glad to come back again if you ever need that Bostonian from Beantown who doesn't live in Beantown on your show.
Well, I'm going to go ahead and conclude this. So stick around after we sign off here, and we can talk a little bit more. But, guys, this was a lot of fun. David, again, I want to thank you for coming on to Faces of Next Gen Live with us. We're going to be doing this again next week. I'm going to put the event together later on, either today or tomorrow. But look for who it is. I think you're going to really be excited to hear her story. Yes, it's a her, and hear what she has to say. So this will be kind of cool. I'm excited to interview her. Yeah, that's about it. I'm Eric Wells, Faces of Next Gen Live. That was the show. Tune in next week for the next episode. And you can find me at legacyleftright.com. Other than that, we'll sign off. Thanks, guys.